This trip by Secretary Yellen is very important in continuing the progress and the momentum of talks between President Biden and President Xi many months ago. We're seeing a thaw in the relationship, and it's critical because we have issues of great contention between the United States and China, but also issues and opportunities of great cooperation, whether it's working against North Korea to stop them from developing a nuclear weapon, to finding a cure for cancer, or trying to address climate change. There are so many areas in which the world is expecting partnership and leadership from both the United States and China. But at the same time, we have some very difficult, very hot issues, economic issues, geopolitical issues between the United States and China. So the more dialogue there is between the top leaders, top officials of both countries, the greater the progress will be in these areas.
Ambassador, we heard from Secretary Yellen on her stopover, her layover in Alaska on the way to China, speaking specifically to our economic relationship, which has been evolving. Listen to what she said, and we'll have you respond. Here she is.
We've agreed that it's important to both of us that we don't want to decouple our economies. We want to continue, and we think we both benefit from trade and investment, but that it needs to be in a level playing field.
If that was hard to hear, Ambassador, she's talking about not decoupling, as we've heard before, but that it needs to be on a level playing field. And we're hearing that this administration is carving out space to protect additional new industries, like we've seen with high-tech chips, for instance. And I wonder to what extent you see that, in fact, leading to a decoupling.
Well, there will be some natural decoupling with countries all around the world and involving many different sectors, because as the pandemic demonstrated, no country wants to be overly reliant on supplies, whether it's consumer goods, manufactured goods, or medical supplies from another country. Because if there's another pandemic or even a natural disaster, a huge earthquake or political upheaval in another country, we don't want, for instance, companies in America suddenly cut off from so much of what they receive from China, which is why you're seeing a lot of companies, multinational companies, U.S. companies, foreign companies, diversifying their supply chain so that they're not so reliant on China. So much of what American consumers use every day and purchase every day in their daily lives comes from China, whether it's microwaves, whether it's the tools that they use, clothes and shoes, barbecue sets, you name it. Much of that comes from China. So that creates jobs for the Chinese people. At the same time, China depends very much on American-made goods, including our farm goods, our agricultural goods. China is America's largest agricultural export destination outside of Canada or outside of North America. And so our farmers depend on selling their soybeans and their wheat and their apples and their cherries to China, along with Boeing. Boeing's number one, most of Boeing airplanes are sold to carriers around the world, including China. So our economies are intertwined, and which is why Secretary Yellen is saying we don't want a complete decoupling, but companies, whether Chinese companies or American companies, are beginning to diversify their supply chain to include other parts of the world.
Well, as we talk about the supply that comes from China, Ambassador, one of the things we know that the Treasury Secretary is going to be talking about specifically is industrial overcapacity and the way that that can be manipulated in terms of supply and demand to affect pricing or access to certain things that China is producing. When she goes and airs those concerns, how likely is it that China is going to receive those and say, okay, yes, you're right, we will be changing our behavior on that front? Isn't it to China's advantage to continue that kind of overcapacity in production?
Well, China is trying to jumpstart their economy coming out of the pandemic by offering subsidies and government incentives for industrial output. Certainly, they are leading the world in terms of the manufacturing of electric automobiles and the battery technology that goes with electric automobiles and buses, and also in the solar area. But if they do so by stimulating or having too much capacity, dumping their products into the world, flooding the world with their products and driving prices down, that's going to actually destabilize the economies and sectors in many other countries, including here in the United States, with some of the infrastructure and Inflation Reduction Act incentives to bring manufacturing back to America, especially in the solar, clean energy area. That will disrupt and undercut many of the efforts that America and other countries have embarked upon, which will lead to perhaps retaliatory measures against Chinese companies or dumping, unfair subsidies, et cetera, et cetera. And therefore, that will upset the world trade relationship and even cause problems for China itself. So I think the message from Secretary Yellen is, yes, you want to be the world's leading supplier of electric automobiles and battery technology and solar equipment, but you have to do it on a level playing field. And that, I think that's the key message there. Otherwise, there will be repercussions, not just by the United States, but by other countries around the world. And that can also, in the long term, hurt China.